Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for coming out tonight and coming to this amazing temple of books and this amazing podium. My God! I want to tell you about my book, and I want to start with the title, "The Value of Nothing." It comes from an Oscar Wilde quote. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And it's important to observe that Oscar Wilde was a socialist. I just want to say that word. Just let it hang in the air. But because, for the word socialist to be said without then vegetables being thrown is unusual in America today. And it is important for that to happen. And of course, yesterday, of course, was Martin Luther King Day. And I just want to suggest that Martin Luther King himself was a democratic socialist, though, of course, that's something that's hidden from most of us. But the reason I wrote this book was in answer to a question that actually Martin Luther King asked. And I just want to read you a little bit of his speech from the last speech that he gave at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1967, because even though it's not MLK Day, it's worth remembering what he said. Because the way we normally celebrate MLK Day is what? We give bankers the day off, and that seems to be an inappropriate way of celebrating. And so, just a short gobbet to start off with. But MLK said this. He said, "One day we must ask the question: why are there 40 million poor people in America?" And when you begin to ask that question, you are asking questions about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth. And when you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalist economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more, we've got to begin to ask the questions about whole society. We are called upon to help discouraged beggars in life's marketplace. But one day, we must come to see that an edifice that produces beggars needs restructuring. It means that questions must be raised. You see, my friends, when you deal with this, you begin to ask the question, who owns the oil? You begin to ask the question, who owns the iron ore? You have to begin to ask the question, why is it that people have to pay water bills in a world that is 2/3 water? These are questions that must be asked. And these are questions that I'm asking in The Value of Nothing, and which, for MLK, democratic socialism was an answer. Now, I'm not a communist. I'm just open-minded. And I think that many of the solutions that we need to be getting ourselves out of this the current situation we're in terms of market failure are ones that have been stamped out, that have been disallowed for our thinking in this country. And there are solutions that I'll explore at the end. But it's important to see how prices beguile us. And the example that captures people's imaginations is the example of the hamburger, about how we see a hamburger at our local burger joint, and we see that the price of that hamburger is $4. But what if we were to include the environmental costs of producing that hamburger? What if we were to pay for the environmental destruction that, say, that hamburger was grown on land that once used to be rainforest? We heard a lot in the 80s about land that was rainforest being chopped down and then pasture being put there and cows grazing on that. What if we put a dollar value to the rainforest? What if we put a dollar value to the biodiversity that we lose through chopping down this forest? Well, some Indian researchers did that a few years ago, and they lowballed the figures, but the figures that they came up with were that a hamburger shouldn't cost $4, it should cost $200. And that's just the environmental cost of the hamburger. That doesn't include the labor costs, for example, in a hamburger. And if that hamburger is eaten in the United States round about this time of year, then the chances are the tomato in your burger will come from southern Florida. In southern Florida, since 1997, over 1,000 slaves have been freed from conditions of modern slavery. Slaves, not just, they've got a mean boss, but slaves in the sense of being locked up in the back of trucks, being forced, working for pennies a day, being forced to pay $5 to have a shower. But if you're working with pesticides every day, you need to have a shower. And some workers found it cheaper to wash their hands with bleach than to pay the $5 to be able to be able to wash themselves with water. Slaves, in the sense, of course, that the people who incarcerated them have been prosecuted under the articles that constituted abolition in this country. It's modern-day slavery in every sense of the word. And those costs don't feature in our hamburger. And, of course, the costs that happen after we consume the hamburger don't feature in the hamburger. In the United States today, 1 in 5 of our healthcare dollars, $180 billion, is spent looking after someone who has diabetes. That figure is due to rise because 1 in 3 kids born after 2000 will have diabetes in this country. 1 in 2 kids from minority backgrounds. And that means that we are going to be paying a great deal for the way that we consume today. And none of that appears in the bill. None of that appears in our $4. But it's not as if these prices aren't paid. As I say, we pay them in our healthcare costs. Disproportionately, people in developing countries pay for our consumption. If we were, again, there was a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that said, well, again, what if we were to just add up the way, the deleterious effects of our consumption on developing countries? If we were to, figure out the damage that's caused by, holes in the ozone layer that we've caused through our consumption of aerosols, the excess deaths from climate change, the value of mangroves that have been lost through our consumption of shrimp, the emptying of the oceans that's happening through our overconsumption of fish, etc., etc., and they figured that if you put a dollar value, again, very, very conservatively done, if you put a dollar value on this, it ends up that we end up owing people in developing countries for our bill for the last 40 years is $4 to $5 trillion. Now, that's a very conservative estimate. But of course, the way that we do the maths, it is poor people that owe rich people. Third world debt is $1.8 trillion. But the way that we consume today is more than double that. We owe them, but of course we've escaped paying that. And of course, this isn't accidental. This is part of how markets work. And in the book, I sort of show how it is that, in fact, everyone from Aristotle to Adam Smith to Karl Marx even understood that the way prices work in an economy was actually the most trivial sort of part of economics. That the real interesting bit of economics is not what the price is in the open market, but what goes on behind the scenes. I mean, political economists, moral philosophers, as they used to be called, were detectives. Were actually were on the hunt to find out what was going on behind the scenes. I'm not going to rehearse those arguments. You'll be able to find them in the book and see how it is that our free market philosophy is bankrupt, frankly. But it's important to observe that the way we set up our economy today, nature gives capitalism a subsidy, right? I mean, we can see that through the export of costs overseas, the way that we consume. But there are other ways in which capitalism gets a subsidy. I mean, our children will be giving us a subsidy in the way we consume.
You've been listening to the first 10 minutes of a program featuring writer, activist, and academic Raj Patel, talking about his latest book, The Value of Nothing: How to Reshape Market Society and Redefine Democracy. This program is available in full via the PDxJustice Media Productions website at pdxjustice.org. You can also find the program on the Vimeo Home for Videos website at vimeo.com. Just search on the keywords PDxJustice and the speaker's name, Raj Patel. This program was produced by PDxJustice Media Productions of Portland, Oregon. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for supporting listener-sponsored radio, public access cable television, net neutrality, independent bookstores, and all forms of grassroots, democratic community media.